You know, the biggest problem I have sometimes with dating is like political or social views, or seems to be the biggest thing I have when it comes to dating, or comes to making a connection or dating other people, is the religious or just the social and political views or religious views or whatever you want to call it. I do have a lot of issues with that with people. I was just I'm thinking because I told the woman I would basically get. I mean, maybe should give. I was talking to a woman I met on online, right? And she things were going good except up until the last hour or so where we started talking, and she started getting on my case about her political views and where I stand politically and stuff, which I didn't want to get into a political conversation, but she took it to a political conversation and then had a nerve to tell me, that everything I told her about how I felt and etc. didn't sit right with her and etc. So she wasn't sure if she could go forward. So I think she was kind of telling me she just can't go forward, and that's all right because obviously at this point I was like, I tried to see if she would take a couple of days and maybe get back to me and say, and maybe we could really talk it over or something like that, but the woman basically, I think the woman I think is avoiding me or just not talking to me and stuff like that. So I don't think the woman and I are going to be talking or really kind of connecting, because of, like political views basically, because within the last hour of talking to her, there was a lot of, for her, there are things she said there was a lot of political issues. So I said, okay. Supposedly, supposedly she accepts interracial relationships, but she didn't accept my political views or some just differences over a border wall and immigration and differences over Trump and people like that, which I never, I mean, I don't know who I'm voting for. I really don't know who I'm voting for. Part of me wanted to say Trump, but then part of me is kind of looking into Trump and looking into things, and that's why I don't want to really talk about politics. Although people like to talk about politics, and it gets to be a very heated debate when people talk about politics, um, because sometimes I don't even know who I'm voting for up until like the last week of voting, and then it's like I go to the polls and I vote. I can't say who the fuck I'm voting for. I mean, I really don't want the liberals and Democrats to be in there, but as I said before, there's some things that I was affected by that, the Republicans don't stand for, that the Republicans don't stand for. So there's things I'm for that the Republicans don't stand for, but there's also things I'm for that the Democrats and the liberals don't stand for. So I'm kind of like in an in between battle between, finding out whether I want to, vote Republican or vote Democratic. I mean, I don't want to say liberal and I don't want to say like, the far right, but we're talking like, maybe Republican somehow, and or or liberal or not Democratic. I'm gonna say liberal. Liberal's too far left for me, but and I've learned that the hard way. But um, regardless, I don't really want to get into a talk about politics, but nothing really was set in stone. Nothing really is set in stone. I mean, I'm looking at different things, and I mean, it's funny how people say history and things repeats itself and stuff. I mean, there's pictures online that make Trump look like Hitler. So, not that he is, he's a different person, but he might have the characteristics of a dictator or something. Which is history is trying to show us that he might be, but um then again, he might be a really cool person. I don't know because I don't know Trump. So I just know what people try to make it out to be and what people try to view it as. So um, basically, I don't really know where I'm standing in politics. I didn't really want to get into this whole conversation with this woman. It's been about a week or two to several days, and this woman hasn't gotten back to me. There was no sense of talking any further, and the woman said she might already kind of cut it off with me. So, sad news is she was for interracial relationships, which kind of was a high point for me, and I kind of was hopeful that maybe it would turn into an interracial relationship. But I think she was from Pennsylvania or something like that, and she's still at a distance. Although she had family in the area, she still was at a distance from me, and still didn't drive, and still wasn't able to get to me. But she understood about mental health issues and stuff like that. She understood stuff. She kind of was hearing me out about my interracial stuff, and where I kind of stood about feeling like I was being blacklisted by the arts, and where I stood with that, where I almost felt like I was being cancel cultured and shit because of a lot of it is a lot of personal disagreements and a little bit of political disagreements, because obviously there were some political differences that arose after. Actually, first and foremost, there were personal differences that kind of changed my political views. There were personal differences and some wrongdoings and things that happened to me that changed my political views, or that put me in a really spot where I didn't feel like I wanted to have the same political views as I had. It really wasn't the fact that I just wanted to change my political views. There was a lot of personal stuff that had happened, and a lot of stuff that kind of changed my perspective and heart in the matter, that I'm kind of not feeling the same about being, the liberals per se. Um, I mean, the Republicans are not for abortion. I mean, I already had relationships where I had exes and stuff, and we did have to have my ex get an abortion, basically, because obviously some things had happened, and we could have almost had a kid and stuff, and I had a couple exes have to have a couple of my exes are people I've been with, sexually, had to have an abortion, basically. So, um, which kind of saved me from the relationship in a way. It kind of saved me from the relationship. It kind of saved me from the wrong situation with the wrong person too. That the fact that they ended up they were in a spot not to have a kid and stuff, and which I'm glad we didn't, because obviously they seemed like the wrong person for me to have a kid, or any type of child or stuff to be with and I was in a weird place at the time, not really thinking properly, and just in a whole different place, and I was just, I don't know. I mean, my values were down, and I wasn't as built or experienced to go through life and cope with certain things as I am now. So, but they say everything happens for a reason. So, but personally, there was a lot of underhanded shit that happened, with people that knew the cultural group, that wanted to discredit me because they were black, and obviously we've had a lot of social and personal interactions that people want to feel like they want to discredit me. People are afraid that I get any opportunities with a black woman. People are so afraid that I'll get any opportunities or any type of recognition or positive respect with a black woman or anybody in the black community, that really my name is being dragged through the mud. Or situations happen where people don't get to really know the real me and stuff like that, but people feel like they have a perspective on me and etc. So they're going around town, telling stories about how they feel that they have a testimony and shit that really is kind of half jacked, because it's not the whole truth and stuff like that. Or maybe it's their truth, but their truth is kind of jacked because truthfully I wasn't fully living in my truth, and there were a lot of things about the situation and stuff that they didn't know, or kind of kept from them. So things are kind of fucked up and jacked in that way, but yet people are kind of telling stories like they have a testimony and shit, and like they're the good guy, and because they went through this and had a testimony and all this other shit, Carl basically gets to be looked like the bad guy or the fucking creep and stuff like that. It's funny how people sometimes hide behind God and hide behind religion and stuff, and make it look like sometimes people are the bad guy, or they could just easily bind and rebuke somebody, and or kind of bind and rebuke somebody, or call them the name of God, just because they feel somebody's a bad person, and that person might not even really be a bad person, and etc. So, but Regardless, religion, politics, and everything kind of do separate us. There's difference of beliefs and stuff. I mean, the thing is, I grew up with a Christian family. I know about, the binding and rebuking and all that, all that wonderful jazz about, how to, testimonies and things. I grew up with a Christian family, or I have a Christian family. So I do know about, God and, things like that. So, a lot of people think I'm a witch or kind of witchy, which is kind of true. I've kind of adopted, a little bit more, of a metaphysical witchy perspective when it came to being a Christian. I mean, I kind of adopted that a little in a lot of ways, coming to Torrington. But if my mom had her full way, I probably would have been, put in church a lot more and maybe more of a conservative Christian. I kind of was leaning towards conservatism because I think in a way, I hear my parents talk about things and how they feel, and I respect my mom, I respect my parents. Well, I respect my mom. I don't respect my father because my biological father, was a deadbeat and a douche, but I respect my mother, and at least I try to respect my mother. My mother is a single mother and a Christian woman, and she tried to raise me all on her own. And she's a woman of the church, and she tries to believe in God and have a relationship with God. So, um, it's something that really has had an effect on my life and my outlook, that I still want to have a relationship with God because I don't know, it's just always been there, and not, it's not even the fact that she believes in God. It's not the fact that other people believe in God. It's because I've been through a lot, and there's things that make me believe in God and believe that their God exists, and I want to have a relationship with God or that higher power that should exist. But people have a problem with that too. I mean, there's things like abortion, there's things like LGBT things. The thing is, I don't think of myself as a woman, I don't think of myself as a female, I don't think of myself as transgender. I was abused as a kid. I've been through abuse. I mean, I'm not sure what all of what happened to me because it was the 90s and people didn't know how to deal with autism and shit. So they drugged, the state of Connecticut drugged me on some heavy medications and shit. And I didn't remember half my childhood as it was blacked out because of the abuse and because of the fucking medications. But I probably was abused as a kid. I probably went through abuse and things, which I had to, which I don't really know for sure because everything's been blacked out. But I mean, just how I interact with certain people over certain things and stuff. I think there had been something that had happened there that obviously really kind of affected my overall perspective on life. But no, obviously, it kind of had, with that and my father being a deadbeat. I'm like what I'm what some people consider a classic, some people feel like a classic, guy without, a father figure, a low self esteem, whatever people want to classify it as, the classic, people want to call it the classic son that basically has no father, with low self esteem and shit like that, or just somebody who has to basically find themselves in the world because because he didn't have proper family guidance. He didn't have proper family guidance with his mother or his father. So, don't get me wrong. My mother is a single mother and she tried to raise me, but she also failed trying to raise me at one point because of her own mental health and her own mental health issues. So, I did end up with the state. Some point in the 90s and shit, and in and out of the state system and shit, which I ended up with DCF and shit, which actually, after I turned 18 and shit, I was dropped off in Torrington. So, but I've been in Torrington for over 15 years, over 20 something years. I've been in Torrington. So, I mean, I'm living my adult life in Torrington because obviously I've been trying to transfer to other places like Bristol, Waterbury, Naugatuck and shit, and I can't seem to move and stuff like that. But regardless, I have tried to go somewhere else to start a new life and a whole bunch of other shit. So, um, but I have had relationships with men. I have experience, I have tried to, I try to go out and try to see where I stood with men, and my liking, whether I like men, whether I don't like men, just the whole situation with that. And the thing is, I don't like feminine men. I don't like feminine men. I don't like transgender men, but I have actually had relationships with men. And yes, I've had relationships with black men. I've actually had relationships with a couple of transgender people. I've had relationships with a couple people in my mental health program, the transgender people I can do without, some of the mental health people I've had, relationships with, they ended up, a lot of them were cutters. A lot of them had this thing where they were cutters. And if you don't know what a cutter is, you got to be a strong person to deal with somebody who's a cutter, because basically they'll gonna hide all your scissors and shit, because they'll take some of your sharp objects and go in the bathroom and start cutting themselves. And I don't want to deal with a relationship like that. I don't want a cutter. I don't want somebody who's gonna cut themselves or harm their body or something like that. Because it's not attractive. It's really not attractive. I mean, I know it's a mental disorder, but it's not something that I personally would find attractive, and something that I would be attractive to. Obviously, it's caused a lot of issues in the past. It's caused a lot of conflicts between me and some people, but I won't date another cutter again. I can't do it. I can't deal with cutters and people who are cutting themselves and harming themselves and shit like that. But the point being is politics, religion, race, and religion, race, and political issues always divide us. They always divide us and stuff like that. I mean, it's still early to tell who I'm going to vote for. I mean, people are jumping down my throat like I'm the bad guy because I say something now, but my opinion can change. The thing is, my opinion can change, and I'm at the point too where I've told people I don't even want to vote at all in some cases. I don't want to vote at all or get on the polls and vote at all, because I just don't like our picks on either on the Democratic side or liberal side or the Republican side in a way, I really don't like either, so I almost want to just let it fall where it falls and not even vote. But a lot of people are trying to say if I don't vote or if I don't go out there and make my voice heard, then if many people don't vote and etc., then they don't get counted and they can lose the right to vote. So, um, so. But regardless, where I stand politically is still up in the air. Part of me was going to be like, yay, Trump, but, I'm looking at kind of Trump's thing where he's being kind of matched up with history, and I'm wondering kind of some things about Trump. Thing is, I'm not following politics too heavily. I kind of just picked a party, and I kind of picked a party, and I picked something, and I said, oh, I'm gonna go with it. So, or go with the opposite of what I was actually already doing, which say the fact that I was going kind of liberal or democratic for several years. I was going to try the other party, which the only other party we have is basically the Republicans. But should I really even try the Republicans? Should I even really go there for for myself and etc.? Maybe not in some cases. So at this point, the whole political shit is so fucked up that I don't even want to really get into the situation where I get involved, But it's kind of basically destroyed an opportunity for a relationship, because the woman had a little fit about where I stood with politics, and I was trying to say to her that, my opinions and things could change and stuff, but because I gave her my opinions and she felt so strongly or some type of way, she was like, oh, I don't think I can actually talk to you again and stuff like that. So I said, okay, which I'm assuming she's not going to want to talk to me again and stuff like that, because it's been about a week to several days, and this woman that was supposed to be possibly open to interracial relationships and possibly she was older too. She was like 40 something years old, and she was older, and she was like from Pennsylvania, and she wanted to talk to me as a 35-year-old guy that was younger, but Regardless, the other thing that got in the way too with her, I don't say it got in the way. I mean, it could be a lifestyle change. It could be something that I would have to, maybe work around and change. But she was a vegetarian. She was a vegetarian. I'm not really vegetarian, so that was another thing that kind of got in the way a little bit. Although I could obviously maybe work, in changing my life to be more veggie. I've tried that life. I mean, I like the Morningstar veggie burgers. I do like the Morningstar veggie burgers and Morningstar veggie chicken. So it's not like I don't like the Morningstar veggie burgers and stuff. But so and she was still eating eggs and cheese and stuff, but she's still trying to go more veggie with her life, and so I mean, I was like, oh, I can still eat eggs and cheese. That's not bad, if I could still eat eggs and cheese. And some vegetarians are like that, that they're not vegan, but they can still eat, cheese and dairy, but they won't, eat meat and stuff like that. And sometimes I wonder too about, going veggie again, because sometimes I'm a meat eater and stuff, but sometimes I cook chicken and stuff, and then after a couple of days of having leftovers and stuff, it just doesn't look right in the fridge. I usually have to dump it out and stuff, and it just doesn't look right by me. It looks kind of nasty and stuff, and it kind of turns me off from eating meat a little away in a little bit because it just doesn't look right. So, but yeah, no, but I was supposed to be talking to this woman, and the woman was kind of right that there were civil liberties that I kind of am about when it comes to my right of like loving guys, loving guys and loving the same sex, and um things like abortion, which it's still a very picky issue for a lot of people. I mean, it could have different, it has different opinions for me. I mean, obviously in certain situations for me, it actually has come in handy. It actually has saved me from a lot of issues when it came to almost having kids with the wrong people. Well, granted, I hope these people got an abortion, but um, it saved me from a lot of issues. It saved me from a lot of issues. I mean, I always tell people, it's like, people like, oh, do you have any kids? I'm like, none that I know about. I usually say none that I know about, because honestly, I mean, you can sleep around with somebody, and shit happens, because obviously you slept around with that person, and sometimes shit can happen, and you could have a kid with somebody that you don't know about. But my usual response is just not that I know about, just in case one day there is a kid somewhere out there or something that I have that I'm gonna have to take care of, or possibly be in the kid's life, or possibly not. Who the fuck knows? But regardless, things do happen. Things happen when people interlock and intermingle like that. Sometimes shit happens. But um as far as I know, I have no kids, which is good. A lot of people say I shouldn't I shouldn't raise kids right now with my situation and my income and my lifestyle and shit, and just the way my life is. I'm not in a place to raise kids. I'm just not. So, I mean, sometimes I thought about raising somebody else's kids, from a previous relationship. I thought about raising somebody else's kids and being kind of involved with somebody else's, situation, because I'm a huge kid, and I'm a huge child at heart, when it comes to like, things that kids like and stuff. I think some people, my stepfather who passed away, thought I could be really good kind of interacting and being a mentor to like younger kids and stuff. But I don't know. Some people say yes, some people say no. Some people say I just got to go on with my life and do what I got to do. Um, which I do, which I do got to go on with my life and do what I have to do. But yeah, political stuff just divides us, and it just makes us upset and stuff. And at first I was going back and forth with myself for a couple of days. I was going back and forth, and that's kind of what a couple of Facebook lives were about. It was like, is this woman right? Is this woman wrong? At the end of the day, my political issues and my preferences of where I stand, where political issues and things, still is my situation. I can't have anybody kind of persuade that or change that. So if I vote for Trump, I vote for Trump. If I don't vote for Trump, I don't vote for Trump. If I don't vote at all, I mean, all these things are yet to be determined. I mean, because I am a voter. I mean, I'm not like somebody who's been voting that long. It's only been maybe like 3 or 4 elections. Only been 3 or 4 elections. I haven't been really voting that long when it came to voting or making my voice heard at the polls. So I'm not really that up to par with politics or where we might stand in the political matters. But race divides us. Racial issues divide us, political issues divide us, and religion seems to divide us. When really we're all one race, and the invisible string of life connects us, and we all are connected in life, and etc. But yet people seem to think we need to be divided for whatever the reason, or feel like there needs to be a divide in the way we operate, and the way we connect, and the way our skin color is. But yeah, and the thing is too is that people think now because I don't support Black Lives Matter, I'm not supporting culture. And the thing is, I want to support culture. I want to support cultural stuff. I want to support Black women, but I don't want to get in the confrontational stuff or the political stuff of Black Lives Matter. But I do want to support the cultural stuff of supporting a Black woman, and supporting what she's about, and maybe her culture and stuff. I just don't want to do it in the way of supporting Black Lives Matter, and that seems to be a confrontational issue with a lot of Black people right now, because a lot of Black people seem to want to, be behind Black Lives Matter. The other thing is I'm not black. I'm not black, and my race is not black. I'm an Italian. I'm a mixed mutt. I'm a mixed mutt Italian, which means my ancestry is from a lot of different cultures and backgrounds. But I am Italian. I'm Russian. I'm French Canadian. I'm German. Slovakian. So basically the war with Ukraine and the war with Russia right now, or the situation with Russia and the Ukraine, is basically my ancestors fighting against each other, which kind of is a big impact on my overall outlook of the war and how things are going with the situation, and another political issue which I don't want to get into, but it does kind of affect me because my ancestry is also from Russia, and it's also from the Ukraine, or from that part of the UK. So for many people who don't know, but so there are a lot of issues and a lot of stuff with that. Sorry, nasal drip this morning, but yeah, I just wanted to get that off my chest. I was waiting for this woman to kind of message me back this morning, or message me back at some point, and she never messaged me back. She never said anything when it came to talking to me and etc. So, I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going to stand. I don't know if I'm going to vote. I don't know if I'm going to vote at all. Part of me was kind of thinking like, yay, Trump, just because I've already tried the liberals and the Democrats, and already been through the liberals and the Democratic stuff, and how things have been happening and stuff. So part of me was going to do the total opposite and probably vote Republican and stuff like that. I mean, was I being spiteful in a way? Maybe. I might have been a little spiteful in the way. Some spite might have been, my influence in the situation to vote that way. But at the same time, I got so sick of like the Democratic stuff and the liberal stuff, and didn't agree with certain things, or how I kind of got treated and etc., that I kind of was changing my views, and not changing my views because I wanted to change my views just politically. It's just because personally, and I've had a lot of changes of heart, and I've had a lot of personal experiences and underhanded shady shit that had kind of changed my views of where I stood and stuff like that, especially with the arts and stuff that have taken, which obviously have a lot more of a liberal outlook and a lot more democratic outlook, that the arts and stuff really kind of had a big effect on how I felt, especially when I got kind of, I say blacklisted. I mean, some people I just walked away from, but although I say I'm blacklisted, although I say, certain people are kind of cancel culturing me, and some people kind of will probably try to cancel culture me and stuff for just speaking my mind, but, in some cases I kind of walked away from people, publishers and things, and because of just simple disagreements of how we felt about, the personal matters in the arts and how things have played out, that they say one thing that they're not affected by something, but yet they're still supporting the people, or still saying they want to get behind the people that I have issues with, and etc. And I just couldn't be about that life, so I had to kind of separate myself and walk away, So, obviously there's just disagreements like that where I've had to walk away from stuff and walk away from publishers and kind of say I'm not going to work with the publisher because I just can't go forward, over my own, beliefs and values, so, or self-worth at that point, but anyways, just wanted to get that off my chest. It's about 6 o'clock. I might, I might go downstairs and do laundry. Might go downstairs and put in my laundry because I want to get the laundry started as early as possible. If I can get it, get down there and get the laundry in as soon as possible and get it out of the laundry. I would like to start my laundry and get that taken care of. Because the sooner I do it, the sooner I can get it done, and the sooner it won't be that bad. So that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to get ready to go downstairs and get into the laundry room and just try to get, start getting my laundry in there and get it, Some people do it early on a Saturday. Some people do it early so they can have the whole day, or some people try to do it on a Friday and stuff before, so people don't have to just, rush and do it. But, I'm not really doing anything else at this point. There's there's a watermelon festival today. It's a big arts and cultural thing that happens in the park across from my house. But, I'm not going. I'm not going at all. I don't plan on going. I might change my mind, but I really don't need to go because after all the stuff personally that happened in the arts and etc. Right now I just don't have money and stuff for the arts and support others. Sorry. Right now I don't have money and stuff to support others. So I got bad nasal drip this morning. So right now I don't have money and stuff to support others, and my or other situation. I really have to take care of my own. So that's basically what I'm doing, basically taking care of my own. So, yeah. So, I don't know. That's my political talk. That's where I stand. That's where I stand with politics. I don't know. Politics are up in the air for me, but I'm not supporting Black Lives Matter, but I am supporting cultural issues. Obviously black women's appearance is something to be appreciated. Because black women can be pretty and attractive too. When it comes to certain things like a black woman's hair or a black woman's attire, that that's being accepted into the world, that should be something I really do admire and respect, or something I should be for, but just like, I can't get, as a white person, I can't get into black politics. I can't get into black politics. I can't get into black issues. I can't get into any of that. I was kind of getting involved in that, and I was told, well, you're not welcome. You're not doing it appropriately. We don't feel like you're welcome to do it appropriately. We don't feel like you're welcome to be in black politics. So I said, okay, Here I was going to say Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, and one of my biggest gripes, one of my biggest gripes was the fact that I was going to say Black Lives Matter, but yet people wanted to call me a race traitor because I actually wanted to love outside my race and wanted to be in a relationship with a black woman, and, many people frown upon that when promoting black love, and, black love being the way, and everybody's like, race traitors, or white men are the bad guys for trying to take our women, and, mate with our women and try to find love for themselves, and just something I didn't agree with. So I'm just not a supporter of it. It's the fact that it's not the fact that I don't support culture. It's not the fact that I didn't want to love outside my race, or really kind of support another woman of culture, another culture. It's not that fact. I'm very cultural. I mean, I like to eat at cultural places. I like cultural food. I like cultural music. I try to learn a little bit of cultural norms and things, but at the same time, I just don't get involved in certain politics or political issues or political controversialness that pushes an agenda or pushes some type of agenda or things that people might find controversial and etc. So it's just the way I feel. I mean, obviously, I'm also for speaking my mind a little bit too. I'm for speaking my mind and speaking my voice and saying things now that I haven't had the will or the courage to say for the sake of professionalism. For the sake of professionalism and for the sake of opportunities and things, I've had to really be silent about my voice and where I stand, with how I felt about certain, personal things that went down, and kind of how they're playing out into a cultural aspect, or people are trying to use the cultural aspect against me because I'm also white and etc. So so that's obviously, where I stand and what's happening. But I gotta get going now, because I gotta go get this laundry in the thing, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna, kind of uphack all my nasal drip right now. So, because that's what I do in the morning. Sometimes I'll get sick. I'll get sick and I'll be like head first in the sink. So, I'm kind of wondering if I'm gonna be sick in a few minutes. So, um, I took my reflux medications, but I'm still, Anyways, just wanted to get that off my chest. Just wanted to just talk about that. But anyways,